She was abandoned by her tribe, left to die on the Montana plains. Only one man and his daughter dared to protect her. Witness courage, trust, and the power of humanity in a frontier where danger lurked everywhere. Like, subscribe, and tell us where you're from. Let's get started. The summer sun hung low over the Montana plains, casting long shadows across Jacob Hart's homestead. The tall grass swayed gently in the warm breeze, carrying the scent of dust and hay. Jacob paced the porch, eyes scanning the horizon. 2 days had passed since his daughter disappeared, leaving only a hastily scribbled note. His stomach knotted with worry when the wooden gate creaked. Jacob froze. A figure appeared, first his daughter, hair tangled, cheeks streaked with dirt, eyes wide with urgency. Behind her, a young Apache woman stumbled forward, her movements slow and careful. Her hands were bound with light rope, and her clothing torn and dusty from travel across the plains. The sight took Jacob's breath away. The girl's face, though exhausted, held a quiet determination that mirrored his daughter's resolve. "Dad, we found her," his daughter said, voice trembling but firm. "She needs our help." Jacob's jaw tightened. He had lived long enough on the frontier to know that strangers often brought trouble. This young woman, far from her people, could be danger itself, or she could be the innocent they claimed to be. He studied the Apache woman's eyes, dark and steady despite the fear that lingered there. There was something in her gaze that spoke of resilience, of a will to survive. Jacob felt a stirring in his chest, a mixture of protective instinct and cautious curiosity. "Bring her inside," he said, voice roughened by 2 days of worry. The women hesitated briefly, then nodded, understanding the unspoken boundaries of trust. Inside the cabin, the floorboards creaked under their weight. The Apache woman's steps were hesitant, unpracticed, as if she feared she might stumble. Jacob's daughter gently guided her, whispering encouragements, while Jacob followed, keeping one hand on the young woman's shoulder, steadying her. The warmth of the fire contrasted sharply with the heat of the summer day, and the smell of smoke mingled with hay, grounding the moment in domesticity. He motioned toward a chair near the hearth. "Sit," he said, voice softening. The Apache woman sank carefully onto it, eyes darting between Jacob and his daughter. The rope that bound her hands was removed slowly, and her wrists were examined for marks and bruises. Jacob's daughter offered her a clean cloth, and she wiped at the dust and dried blood, revealing the faint scratches that traced the story of her journey. Jacob busied himself with a kettle, heating water over the flames while keeping an eye on the two women. He asked no questions yet, letting the tension dissolve naturally. There was an unspoken understanding that words were unnecessary to begin forming trust. The Apache woman's body relaxed slightly, shoulders dropping, eyes softening with the recognition of safety that hadn't existed for days. When water was ready, Jacob's daughter helped the Apache woman wash her face and hands. The touch of warm water seemed to awaken something within her, brief, flickering comfort amidst the overwhelming uncertainty. She looked up at Jacob, her gaze searching, measuring. His eyes met hers with calm assurance, silently conveying that in this small cabin, danger would not reach her tonight. Once the Apache woman had cleaned herself, Jacob brought out a thin blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "You're safe here," he said firmly. His daughter nodded beside him, hands clasped nervously. The simplicity of the words seemed to carry weight beyond their sound, grounding the woman in a moment where she could finally breathe. There were no promises yet, but for the first time in days, she allowed herself a quiet exhale. The cabin, modest as it was, felt larger than life that night. The firelight cast gentle shadows on the walls, dancing across the simple furnishings and the faces of three people brought together by circumstance. Jacob's daughter, exhausted but resolute, knelt beside the Apache woman, offering water from a small tin cup. Hesitation gave way to trust as she accepted it, sipping slowly, her dark eyes never leaving Jacob's. Jacob's mind wandered back to the 2 days his daughter had been gone. He had imagined every possible danger: wild animals, hostile strangers, the unforgiving wilderness itself. And yet, none of those fears compared to the strange, delicate balance of trust he now had to maintain. These two women, different as they were, had survived together long enough to reach his cabin, and that was a testament to their courage. He allowed himself a moment to study the Apache woman. She was young, perhaps 20, with dark hair tangled from travel and sun-browned skin. Despite her exhaustion, there was strength in her posture, a quiet defiance in her eyes. She had faced hardship he couldn't fully understand, yet here she sat, alive and willing to accept his care. That resilience stirred an unexpected respect within him. Jacob's daughter spoke softly, explaining little about how they had found her. She omitted the dangers and trials, sparing her father from needless worry. The Apache woman listened, nodding occasionally, her face composed but reflective. In that room, a fragile understanding began to form, an unspoken agreement that this man and his daughter were allies, protectors in a world that had offered little kindness to the woman before. The night stretched onward, filled with quiet moments of tending, feeding, and care. Jacob refilled the kettle, brought over bread, and watched as the Apache woman hesitated before accepting food. Her first bites were slow, careful, as if tasting warmth for the first time in days. Jacob sat back, observing the subtle shift in her demeanor, the easing of tension, the faint trust beginning to grow. Outside, the Montana night deepened, stars twinkling coldly over the plains. The wind whispered through the grasses, carrying distant sounds of wildlife and the endless expanse beyond. Within the cabin, the three shared silence that spoke louder than words. The Apache woman's breathing evened out. Jacob's daughter smiled faintly. And Jacob, tired from worry but unbroken, understood that sometimes protection was the only language needed. Hours passed quietly. The Apache woman finally relaxed fully into the blanket, eyes closing as the fire crackled. Jacob glanced at his daughter, who returned the look with unspoken agreement. They had done the right thing. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly, unforgiving yet beautiful. Inside, three lives intersected by chance and choice formed a fragile, promising bond that neither time nor circumstance could immediately break. Jacob finally allowed himself to sit, shoulders sagging with relief. The Apache woman slept, breathing softly. His daughter leaned back, exhausted but calm. The night had been long, but the worst was over. The first steps of trust had been taken, and with the Montana dawn approaching, he knew that this encounter marked the beginning of something larger: protection, family, and shared humanity on the frontier. The wooden cabin creaked under the weight of the Montana wind. But inside, warmth spread from the hearth, casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn walls. The Apache woman sank onto the floor, wrapped in a thick blanket, shivering slightly. Jacob's daughter knelt beside her, brushing back stray hair and murmuring reassurances. Silence hung between them, punctuated only by the crackling fire. Jacob removed his coat and draped it over a chair, allowing himself a moment to study the young woman. Her face was pale but calm, the lines of exhaustion visible around her eyes. He could see the faint bruises on her wrists where the rope had rubbed, and the dust that still clung stubbornly to her clothes. Every detail told a story of endurance and survival. His daughter fetched a small tin cup of warm broth, and gently coaxed the Apache woman to drink. Hesitant at first, she finally sipped, the warmth spreading through her chilled body. Jacob watched closely, noting the subtle shift in her posture, shoulders relaxing, eyelids drooping, and a faint spark of trust beginning to shine. The frontier had hardened him, but he had never seen resilience quite like this. The night deepened. Outside, wind gusting over the endless prairie, rattling the cabin boards. Inside, the three of them shared a quiet meal, simple bread and warm broth. Jacob spoke little, letting his actions convey care and safety. The Apache woman's cautious eyes followed him, searching for signs of threat. There were none, only the steady presence of two people who had chosen to protect her when the world had abandoned her. Jacob's daughter moved closer, her hands resting gently on the woman's shoulders. She whispered, "You're safe now. You don't have to face this alone." The Apache woman's lips quivered slightly, a tear tracing down her cheek. Jacob felt a surge of protective instinct he hadn't known he still possessed. On the frontier, Such moments were rare, an oasis of trust amid the harshness of life. He stoked the fire, watching the flames dance across the walls. The cabin smelled of smoke and wood, a comforting contrast to the sharp scent of snow and cold outside. Each crackle echoed softly, a lullaby in the otherwise empty plains. For the first time in days, the Apache woman allowed herself a slow exhale, letting the fire's warmth seep into her bones. Jacob considered the choices before him. He could leave her to wander, follow his own solitude, or embrace the unknown responsibility. His family's honor, and the instincts drilled into him by years of frontier life, left no room for hesitation. Protection was not a choice, it was a duty. And in that moment, he knew he would honor it. Whatever the cost. The Apache woman spoke softly, breaking the silence. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jacob nodded, offering only a small smile, understanding that words were inadequate. The trust between them could not be forced. It had to be earned, nurtured by actions rather than promises. And that night he had already begun that work. As the night wore on, the Apache woman relaxed further, leaning slightly against the wall, eyes half closed. Jacob and his daughter exchanged a glance, silently acknowledging the progress made. In the stillness, they shared a quiet understanding. Protection, courage, and humanity often manifested in small acts of care, especially on a frontier that demanded strength and vigilance at every turn. Jacob rose to check the door, ensuring that the latch was secure against the Montana wind and any prying eyes from the surrounding prairie. The Apache woman stirred, raising her head to watch him. He returned her gaze calmly, a silent message passing between them. She was safe here, at least for tonight. And sometimes that was enough to begin rebuilding trust. By midnight, the fire had burned low, leaving embers glowing faintly. Jacob placed another log atop, the sparks rising like tiny stars against the dark cabin ceiling. The Apache woman had drifted into a tentative sleep, her breathing even and less tense. Jacob's daughter remained seated beside her, watching, ensuring she was comfortable and unharmed. The responsibility weighed heavily, but it also carried a quiet pride. Jacob allowed himself to sit, rubbing his hands together to warm them. The firelight illuminated the contours of his face, revealing the lines carved by years of hardship. He reflected on the unexpected turns of life, how a wandering daughter and a lost stranger could intersect his path in ways that changed everything. The frontier was harsh, but moments of trust like this reminded him why he endured. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the cabin windows, painting the room with soft gold. The Apache woman stirred, waking slowly to the warmth and quiet of the cabin. Jacob handed her a cup of fresh water, and she drank carefully, looking up at him with something akin to gratitude. The night's fear had given way to cautious hope. The prairie outside stretched endlessly, blanketed in morning mist. Jacob stood by the door, surveying the vast expanse, and felt the enormity of the task ahead. Protecting the Apache woman would require vigilance, courage, and patience. Yet as he glanced at his daughter and the young woman, he realized that sometimes the most dangerous lands also held the most profound opportunities for compassion and humanity. By mid-morning, the Apache woman had begun to eat, first small bites, then gradually more. Jacob and his daughter assisted quietly, ensuring she felt safe. Conversation was sparse, punctuated only by gentle reassurances and the occasional hum of a wind chime by the window. Trust was forming, subtle but unmistakable, in the shared warmth. And simple acts of care. Jacob finally addressed her, voice steady. "You're safe here, and we won't leave you alone." The Apache woman nodded slowly, a faint smile crossing her lips. It was small, but in that moment it carried more meaning than any words could convey. The frontier was unforgiving, but it had also offered her sanctuary. As the sun climbed higher, the cabin filled with light and quiet warmth. The Apache woman moved with more confidence, settling into the hearth area. Jacob prepared tools and supplies for the day, checking for anything they might need. In these small, practical actions, he reinforced the protection and stability he had promised. By nightfall, the trio had settled into a rhythm, the Apache woman learning to trust Jacob vigilant in his care, and his daughter serving as the bridge between them. Outside, the plains stretched endlessly, but inside, warmth and human connection had created a small haven in the vast Montana wilderness. Jacob reflected on the day, realizing that courage wasn't only measured by acts in the open plains, but also by opening one's heart to the unexpected. Tonight, the Apache woman slept soundly, and he had kept his promise. On the wild, untamed prairie, he understood that true bravery sometimes meant sheltering the helpless and embracing the unknown.